Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and as you can see, I have taken it upon myself to try out some Molten Strike action this league, because it's supposed to not be very good anymore. It's undergone several changes in, I don't know, the past year or so, because it used to be the king of single target and sustain, and then it got like changed by itself, all kinds of things with Ancestral Call, and the threshold jewels then got changed, and overall it's not really at all the same thing it used to be. And as you can see with the Celestial MTX that I'm playing with, it now has some, or at least I'm using it with some chains and the Wildfire Jewel that makes it bounce several times. So the Wildfire Jewel doesn't give additional projectiles anymore, it instead just makes your Molten Strike chain one time, and then I'm using the chain gem, and you can see that my balls bounce a couple of times. It should be about 3 times now, thanks to the threshold and the chain support gem, and it's basically kind of like a Cyrus Shard's Magma Orb build. Kind of. The balls do go pretty slow because I don't have any approach speed, and you can't really stack single target the way you used to, not that heavily anyway, and it's kind of jank, but it's working out well enough and I'm having fun with it. The whole idea is that it's been overpowered for a while, and now that it's kind of shit, now we need to try and make something out of it. And you can see that it is working well enough, and we do, for the first couple of minutes of the video, I think, not have an explosion chest, and that's completely fine, it still works. But then an explosion chest in this type of build does go quite a long way, because we're scaling a very good fizz to fire conversion, and then a lot of percent fire damage, percent damage in general, since this is an Elementalist with 8 golems, which gives you a lot of percent damage, and then bit of area, and using the golem scaling, we do have quite a nice explosion chest explosion mechanic, similar to how I had the Beefton going off. So be warned, explosion chests aren't amazing in every build. Yeah, they get rid of corpses and it can be nice, but you do have to scale the actual explosions themselves to really get what you're seeing here, sort of a chain reaction going off. And at this stage of the character, I'm wearing some pretty crappy gear in most pieces, but explosion chest plus the golems and this sort of a build or scaling feels really good for clear. And it is less about the Molten Strike and the wildfires, but I've tried it out without the chain, without the wildfire, and it does feel a little bit more lackluster. So they're doing something, and it's somewhat worth using for clear. When you do go into this sort of a setup though, you do sacrifice some of your single target, since you are no longer condensing the balls on a single target anywhere near as much, and they are also attached to chain, so that's reducing your damage. And then the wildfire is taking up a gem slot or jewel slot, so it is worse for single target, but the idea is to just kind of overcome that for most enemies, so you don't have to swap it in and out. And then for actual single target, for when we go into real boss fights and all that, we'll swap out chain for slow approach and swap out wildfire for something a little bit nicer. So that's kind of how I was trying to tackle the new Wildfire and the new Molten Strike, and with this build I'm using an Oni Goroshi, so it's it's a decent amount of fizz to start with, that then gets a huge amount of extra fire damage thanks to the Oni Goroshi special mod. We're converting all of our physical as well, so it is a pure fire build, and that does make things somewhat decent for Molten Strike scaling and the Elementalist Golem scaling as well. So it's working out well enough. I am also running an Abyssus because I wanted to try and fix single target as much as possible. Abyssus is not that good or even very impactful at all for the clear or for the chaining of the balls. It's mostly for how we're trying to scale single target, which is the initial hit of the Molten Strike, and then the balls are kind of doing their own thing, but they're still helpful, they're just not going to be insane. So you can see the balls going off when I'm attacking a single target like this, with the 2 additional strike molten ball dropping helm enchant on the helm, and this is with chain, this is with wildfire, so I don't swap out of the wildfire very often at the moment because it isn't necessary at this level of content. And you can see if you just change herald effects, once again the exploding chest does make things quite a bit different. So there's a lot of herald effects and there's a lot of different effects or feels that you can have for the build. And it just depends which one you like and how you like to do it. So far, single target's been good. So far, clear has been pretty fun. And it's just about fixing the build up for endgame. So let's get into how I've built it so far. So here is my character so far. Level 87 Elementalist called This Is Fine. Yep. Related to the meme about, you know, fire everywhere. This is fine. Since we are currently on fire in this build, using the Oni Goroshi sword, it has a bunch of fizz to start with. As you level up, gets a bit more fizz, etc. Pretty damn good crit. You gain Hurt Embrace when you ignite an enemy, and then that makes you burn for a certain amount of fire damage per second, which we try and outscale through just having lots of regen as an Elementalist. What her Embrace does, if you hit the alt with the additional descriptions, is you can't be stunned. You have 123% of your fizz as extra fire damage, unaffected by burning ground, immune to freeze, chill, ignite, and 20 attack, cast, and movement speed. It's a very powerful buff. It does make Oni Goroshi have a shitload of fire damage, so it's always a pretty good weapon to chuck into a lot of these builds if you can negate the downside well enough. Similar to a Void Forge, it's usually going to have like enough damage for whatever you're doing. It's whether or not you can build around it. So traditionally speaking, an Elementalist with really good regen is good for it. A Chieftain, decent regen. Fire reduction is good. A Slayer with Overleech is really good. Jugs can probably make use of it as well. Things like that. Because you focus more on like out regenning and mitigating a bit of damage rather than just trying to mitigate all the fire. So that's the weapon we're using. It always comes as a 6 link as well. And to begin with, I think it was like 1 Exalt to buy. And our current links here are Molten Strike, Combustion, Inspiration, Multi-Strike, early damage with attacks, and Chain Support. Now, one of the other big changes for Molten Strike a little while ago, maybe like 6 months or something, was that you won't generate balls unless you hit something. So I can't really showcase to you what the Molten Strike looks like. I have to actually hit something. Because previously to that, you can just like fire up balls wherever the hell you were, wherever the hell you wanted, and then things could walk into it and they would die. Whereas now, it's a lot clumsier in that you have to have decent weapon range, have to have things like additional strike, ancestral call, whatever it is, so you can actually hit things and get the balls to drop. So you've noticed that we don't have ancestral call in here. I did have ancestral call up until about 5 levels ago, but the idea is to get rid of the ancestral call by using additional strike with gloves. So far, this is the best I've managed to craft, so they're a work in progress. They're going to get slightly better, I'd like to think. And also, we path all the way down to grab additional strike from Tribal Fury. I think that's probably worthwhile. We do get 2 additional melee range by doing this here as well, but you could obviously anoint it instead, but I plan to anoint this once I've fixed up my dexterity instead of this thing. So the passive tree does go kind of all the way down to the good stuff for most melee builds and all that, but as an Elementalist, it starts over here. It goes through little minion nodes, gets an additional golem over here. We do have an additional golem, another additional golem thanks to the Anima Stone up here, and then we also go over here to scale some minion damage, minion life, just a bit of that, and then we get usual fire stuff, some crit sword stuff, some life, and this is where our wildfire goes, so it gives us an additional chain, less projectiles as well. So if you get 2 additional projectiles from Molten Strike on a helm, it does mean that your chaining things will have 1 additional projectile basically, because I think it gives us 3 projectiles. Yep. So it currently fires off 3. Without the helmet shunt, it'll fire off 2, which still kind of works, but is a little bit more lackluster. And the Abyssus isn't particularly necessary because, as I said, it's more about getting the single target up, and so far single target has been an issue. I think it'll maybe still be fine without the Abyssus. We'll have to wait and see. At the very least, it'll mean you can face tank things a lot better. But I started out up here just to see if things will work, and we can bring it back down if we need to. But so far, it's been totally fine because the way we mitigate the Abyssus extra damage on this type of a build is by having golems and all the golem buffs. So we've also got instant war cries, so I do keep up endurance charges and enduring cry regen quite a lot of the time. with just no investment and just instant Warcry there. But the way we do otherwise do it is through Elementalist, so it gives you a lot of extra buff percent to your golems that you summon thanks to having 8 golems. So we have 2 additional there, 1 additional there, 1 additional there, and then 3 additional from the amulet, which means I can summon 8 golems, which means that every single one of these golems that grant buff effect get quite a lot out of it. So our stone golem gives us like 700 life regen a second, I think. Our lightning golem gives us, actually I haven't looked at those, like 40 attack speed or some shit. Chaos golem gives a lot of fizz damage reduction, like 13% or some shit. I don't know, there's a lot of buffs, and it doesn't matter which ones you summon beyond 1 of each, because the buffs don't stack like that. All you're doing is just getting your 8 golems out, and you pick whichever ones you want that you think are going to survive a bit longer. And up until this point, up until about tier 10 maps, golems rarely died, but they did take damage, and you try and fix that by, currently I've linked them up to meat shield. That makes them a bit more defensive, as well as taking less damage, and then minion life support. And ideally, we could get a bit of regen as well, like from a sulfur flask. So I'm not currently using one, I will if I need to, or a vitality aura, or speccing into some shit like minion life, bit of minion regen, something like that, which we might take spiritual command. We still might go up here and grab that, but I'm currently trying to get a little bit more life in the build, but the rest of the gear kind of needs help anyway. So that's how we scale. We've also got the fire pen there, and that's the passive tree if you need to have a look at it. But I'm currently running Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity, and Anger. Anger has additional crit multi from here, since that affects both the melee portion and the ball portion of our Molten Strike. I did want to try and get some generic crit multi into the build, whereas an Abyssus, for example, is only going to affect the initial strike. Since that is the melee portion of the skill, and the projectiles don't get scaled by melee crit strike multi. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated. We then have Assassin Mark Ring, which I still need to do something to, probably get minus mana cost onto, using a Mark of the Elder again. A belt that I crafted, these are all pretty damn easy to craft with Harvest Crafting now. Tailwind boots, they are still very much a work in progress, they're kind of a piece of shit at the moment, but you can guarantee Tailwind boots with any crit strike rerolls or additional crit strike crafts on Hunter boots with the Harvest Crafting. So Tailwind boots are super easy to get this league. And then I've got a real garbage explosion chest as well, which we'll call a work in progress too. Didn't even Harvest Craft this one. This was just alt regals, so it took me like, I don't know, 1,000 alts or something, but you can guarantee explosion mod on chests through Harvest Crafting as well, but it's usually done for Awaken or Orb Smashing. I'm not yet at that point with my build. So currently that's the build. We'll see how it goes in the next day or so, because I still have plenty of fine-tuning, need to get much more life in this, need to get a bit more defense, while maintaining some good damage and good clear speed, and making sure the golems survive. Golem's biggest problem last league was doing Delirium content, because Delirium fucked them hard, since it's got like physical damage, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't die for a while, and golems do not do the best against all of that. So we'll see how they go. They might suck against Cirrus as well. We might need a helm that instead like resummons them on focus. We'll see how things go. But so far they've been doing fine. Molten Strike's been playing rather nicely. And I don't hate it. It's not the worst. It's not completely dead of a skill. We'll see how we go though. Hopefully it holds up and we don't write it off as a shit skill in today's world. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.